I had my first job at 15. Yeah. I wasn't
You've
supposed to have been hired, but I was.
Okay.
So I'd gotten this incredible opportunity to work at a vertically integrated factory in China.
Welcome to episode 3 of Not Wasting a Single Story. Yes, it's still me, your hostess with the most questions for her guests, Dr. Gamuchrai Mutezo. Today I'm joined by a very interesting man. We've spoken a few seconds, but the number of questions I have for him. I hope you have a pen and paper because we'll get to hear what he does and, importantly, identify opportunities in the space. As you know by now, I do not introduce my guests. I ask them to introduce themselves when I ask, hey, welcome, who are you and why do you do what you do? Welcome, Ashton.
Good afternoon, Dr. G, and thanks for the intro. Or, like you said, it's time for me to introduce myself. So let's go. My name is Ashton Swartbooi. I work at the CSIR in Pretoria, so that's the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research, one of the largest research organizations we have here in South Africa at this stage. Specifically, I work in a group called CSIR and CCU, so that's related to hydrogen, and then the CCU is the carbon capture utilization part, which I'm assuming that's where this discussion is going to head today as well.
And for some of our viewers who may not be familiar with CCU and carbon capturing, what is it? Just to set the tone.
Okay. So CCU, as the abbreviation goes, is carbon capture utilization. It just means that if you've got CO2 emissions from somewhere, you capture the CO2, convert it to something else, and make a green chemical from it. That's where we're trying to go.
Okay, pretty cool. But before we get into the technicalities, where did you grow up? What were some of your influences around sustainability? Did you grow up on a farm with grandmother A and grandmother B? Did you chase a few cows in the process?
No, unfortunately not. So, interesting story. I've got a long story though. Is I grew up in Port Elizabeth. So up until the point of matric, so 18 years old. Decided it's time to go study engineering, went to UCT then, so went to Cape Town, all along the coast then. And after my degree, completed a MSc in chemical engineering, and then after the degree decided to move to Pretoria. And that's where I've been since. So been at the CSIR for good, what would that be now, 21 years?
Oh, wow.
So, yeah.
Okay.
No, I have not chased cows.
Okay.
Although one of my grandmothers did have an uncle who used to invite us to the farms.
Yeah.
So he used to do that, but no, you always used to be scared of the cows, unfortunately.
Okay, that's quite interesting. You're scared of these beautiful energy generating creatures. But hey, just like any kid, you look at a cow and you think twice. You're like, I'm not so sure about the safety around this thing. All right. So can you tell me a little more about your exposure to the concept of sustainability or concepts around waste, circularity? When along your life did it start to be a thing, and what role has it influenced also in your professional space?
I'm going to go back to the conversations that happened just before we started recording, and just say that I think when you try to be an engineer, or when you want to go in to become an engineer, specifically chemical engineering in my case, you think of processes and you think of converting something to something more useful. So there's a process involved in all of that. When I speak about process, I speak specifically a chemical process.
Yes.
But then during the process itself, you've got all of the emissions happening. And then at some stage, you realize that, we are actually the guys that are polluting the environment. Then there's, you have a few subjects that you do, not necessarily, your in-depth master's studies, but there's a few elective courses that you do during the course. And you realize that if there's actually quite a bit of waste, and I'm speaking about air pollution, waste pollution, there's land pollution, water pollution, because of these chemical processes that you do. And then somewhere down the line, you just have to realize that, if we can go the one way in making the product or making the processes and waste, surely we can go the other way as well, and that you can actually make the products, the the chemicals at the end,
Yeah.
you start making them green. And when I speak about green, that's minimizing on the waste
Yeah.
or reusing or reutilizing those waste into different products. And I think when I started at the CSIR, you start looking at these type of things specifically. How can you minimize the waste? What can you do with the waste? You interact with so many other people. We were asking the question earlier on about environmentalist versus a chemist.
Yes.
You interact with environmentalists who tell you, no, but you can't go this way because there's so much waste that you need to do. So you need to either find a different process
Yeah.
that will minimize the waste, or we need to find ways of using the waste to actually convert it to something else usable as well.
Okay, and all of these concepts of reuse, minimization, and so forth, is that I suppose the kind of exposure that you got when you started working at the CSIR, or were you already exposed from an academic perspective when you finished off your degree?
So, like I said, I think there were a few elective courses that we were doing. One specifically was on can't remember the full name of it, but it looked at waste, and waste minimization was part of that. So there was just an elective, like I said, a semester course, small credits that we used to do, and that's where I think the seed would have started. But fully, probably when I started working at the CSR, because our process team at the time had environmentalists on board as well, who were looking at these environmental impacts, and that's where you start looking at, when you start being exposed to LCAs, your life cycle assessments, and all of those type of things. And like I said, being at the CSR now for 21 years, I'm speaking about 20 years ago when these guys were starting developing of these LCA methodologies.
I have to raise a bit of an amber flag. So I also did my studies in chemical engineering, and this was not too long ago. My red flag, actually not amber, but red flag was that evolution of the curriculum, because I was coming into a space that is traditionally as chemical engineering-y, if there's such a word, as it could get. And one is trying to introduce the principles of material flow analysis as well as circularity, but the curriculum was just on the bit of a tough side. And it had me wondering, when is the right time to relook, and who should relook this curricula? So hearing you say that as well, that you were exposed to waste, but as an elective, it has one wondering, should that still be the case, where we are the ones who are designing systems that create the waste, but waste management is an elective?
I think, and again, I'm going back to the conversations we had before the recording started itself. So it's the old generation of engineers, if I can call it that, who had the one-line thinking versus the new line of engineer or new generation of engineers that are coming in. And yes, like you said, maybe you and I are the ones that need to go and start and have those discussions. I don't want to mention specifically people by name, but I was in discussions with a few academics on one of my trips quite recently. And one of the, again, still an elective, but one of the electives was looking at renewable energy. So I know it's not in the waste minimization, but I mean, it's going towards where I want to say South Africa and the world is heading with renewable energy.
Yeah.
And all of the other electives, according to, like I said academic, all the other electives sort of had to be stopped because all of these kids wanted to go and do the renewable energy space. So like you said, maybe it's time that, we go and have a sit down with the universities, focus the curriculum down to include waste minimization, environmental issues, not just as an elective, but as a full, even if it's a semester course. And then get I say the young generation involved from an early age.
Okay. In your personal capacity, are you involved in any sustainability related activities, whether it's you separate material at your home or you engineer designs with family members that are geared towards minimization as well as clean energy production?
No, unfortunately not. I'm gonna raise my hand and say no. I'm bad like that.
Okay.
And it's a funny thing because actually just this weekend past, I had a daddy and daughter day. So
Yes.
my daughter's a three-year-old toddler,
All right.
going on 18 at this stage.
Oh, okay.
Mummy unfortunately was working on Sunday, so
Yes.
so I was busy watching her, and we took her out. I took her out to the mall. We were having fun, and afterwards we went to the bin to throw away the paper, and there's a recycle bin over there. So it says paper, plastics, and I think the other one was tin or metal.
Yes.
And as soon as I throw it in, you look inside, and then everything is just the same bin, though. So on the
Yes.
outside, you've got the separations to mark it, but on the inside, they all go into the same bin.
Yeah.
And I must admit, it was one of the things I was thinking driving over here is that I wonder if they're going to ask me about, how much recycling do you do in your own personal
Ta-da.
space? And it's like, no, I don't. And it's just like I said, it just comes down to everybody. It's very easy just to throw everything into one bin.
Yeah.
And even if you do separate it, where does it go afterwards?
Yes.
Still into one bin.
Yeah.
So again, maybe it's time for us to use the podcast. And I'm looking at my camera over here. Maybe it's time for us to use the podcast and say that people, I think it's time that we actually start looking at recycling a lot better from a personal perspective, and then help that to grow, the space of people actually taking waste seriously, if I put it those words.
Good. I'm delighted that you've indicated, because at the end of the season, we are going to give him a call and find out if he's now recycling at home. And because one element I'm really starting to appreciate is the power of separation at source, especially in our homes. So if you, me, Thomas, Mary, Cynthia are all practicing some sort of separation, we then start to see the value of waste. And that opens up probably new markets for engineers as well to come into play, right? And with that being said, over the past 20 odd years in the space, where are you seeing some of these opportunities for aspiring entrepreneurs or even younglings thinking of what to study in the next 3 to 5 years?
Like I said earlier, I think there's lots of emphasis currently going on renewable energy. There's lots of emphasis going on hydrogen. And again, that's now my topic of expertise.
Yeah.
So hopefully we'll get to that, and it's something that
Sure.
I can speak about because it's something I know about. But I think that's where the next generation is heading towards. And why I say that is that we need to remember that renewable energy, yes, it's clean energy if you think of solar and wind and all of those things. But it does address the waste issue as well. I know there are lots of life cycle assessments that happen around the type of hydrogen, different colors of hydrogen. There's lots of life cycle analysis that happen about the renewable space, what happens with solar panels after, the end of life, especially even on your wind turbines, what happens with the blades afterwards. Is it just, so there's lots of developments in the space. And like I said, I think most people are heading into that space. The new generation, if I can call it that, is heading into that space because it's the hot topic at this stage. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm just going to add a little caveat to that to say is that when you look at waste, we don't need to see it as waste, and I'll get to why, but we need to see waste as a feed source, feedstock for those chemical processes that I was referring to earlier on as well.
Awesome. You've set a nice tone now as we get into the, I suppose, semi-technical stuff, the hydrogen component. Conversations left, right, and center, sometimes very positive, and other times so many question marks in terms of the energy input versus energy output, and importantly, what type of waste material is developed along the way. So could you just set the tone for us in appreciating, firstly, what is hydrogen and the different types of hydrogen, because they're different colors as well. And thirdly, the, I suppose, untapped waste component of it as well.
Okay. So let's start off with what is hydrogen. So hydrogen is that first little chemical element on the periodic table. One of the lightest. one of the lightest elements. It's a gas, flammable gas. And when most people think about hydrogen, they think of the old Hindenburg disaster. The blimp that went up in smoke and fire. But it's I suppose it's flammable in that sense. But I mean, it's been controlled and it's been used everywhere. If you think of big petrochemical companies specifically as well. In terms of the different forms or different colors of hydrogen, that's just related to your carbon footprint, if I can put it very, very bluntly.
Okay.
So you do get, excuse me, you do get your green hydrogen. That would be hydrogen that by definition has a zero carbon footprint. So your energy inputs are usually from renewable sources because, again, it's a zero carbon footprint energy input. And that's how you would make green hydrogen. So it's energy input into an electrolyzer, and you split water into hydrogen and oxygen.
Yes.
Then you get blue hydrogen. Okay, let's start off with the first one. The other one is gray hydrogen.
Yes.
That's how we know hydrogen today. That's where companies like Sasol use a process called steam methane reforming, and you got very large CO2 footprints coming from that, so emissions of CO2.
Yes.
But that's how they will usually make hydrogen. If you then go one step further and you capture the CO2 from the air, then you get what you call blue hydrogen. So it's still the same hydrogen.
Okay.
You just, instead of emitting upwards, you're capturing and emitting it downwards. When I say downwards, you can look at carbon sequestration. So you take your CO2, you put it down in a well, and over time, and speaking about geological time frames over here, they convert back into rock, or they react with the rock and basically start making carbonate rocks.
Yeah.
And then the last one where I'm specifically involved in is what we call turquoise hydrogen. And turquoise hydrogen comes from using of biogas as a feedstock, or at least the methane component from biogas. And you're cracking the CH4 molecule into the hydrogen and then a solid carbon. So you don't have emissions going upwards, you actually have a solid carbon that you can form. So it's a carbon capture technology built into the process, if I can call it that one.
Yeah.
So yeah, those are the different colors, and yeah, that's where I'm heading towards.
Okay. Before we look at, I suppose, the waste components, with this turquoise hydrogen, would it be safe to assume that it makes it the most circular and most environmentally benign compared to the others? Because you can use the hard carbon in other industries as well.
In terms of a circularity aspect, yes.
Okay.
Then turquoise hydrogen does become fully circular, as you've just rightly pointed out. The carbons can be used in different processes, water purification. You can tweak your catalyst for the process. You can actually make various grades of carbon. So anything from carbon blacks, and then you can use those for tar and roads and tires and things like that, all the way to graphitic carbons. When I speak about graphitic carbons, then you look at components for batteries, electrodes, those type of things because of its conductivity problems. In terms of cleanness, or not circular, but just clean, then green hydrogen is obviously the main target. No emissions, but I think, and this comes from just being in the space, and green hydrogen is, I want to say, the end goal. But before we get to the end goal, and the end goal is still very expensive at this stage, but before we get to the end goal, there needs to be a bridging somewhere in between.
Yeah.
And that's where the other hydrogen components, other hydrogen colors actually come into play.
Yes. Okay. All right. So with that understanding, let's now unpack the value chain and see when producing product A, product B from the different colors, what waste material comes out and how is that valorized or dealt with? And I'll explain why I'm asking this question after your response.
Okay, so like I said, if you go for green hydrogen, there's really no waste. If you look at full life cycle assessments, then you need to worry about what happens with the panels. If it's solar panel driven, what happens with the solar panel at the end. But theoretically speaking, from the process, there's no waste. If you're looking at, like I said, where we are at this stage with grey hydrogen, you've got lots of CO2 emissions coming from that. You can say, okay, but we're cleaning that up, we're capturing it and going to the blue hydrogen space again. But there's still CO2 that you're pumping down into aquifers or holes in the ground, old oil wells, something that's in the ground. And you need to make sure that obviously you don't have a hole where you're just releasing the CO2 at a different source.
Yes.
And then, like I said, the other thing is about the turquoise hydrogen, where your waste, inverted commas, is a solid carbon that you can just, as we just said now, you can actually just use it in a different process somewhere along the line, making it a lot more circular than any of the others at this stage.
Perfect. Now, there could be an entrepreneur or a young person who's trying to figure out, now that I've left varsity or a TVET college, what's my next? Can I consider starting a business, whether it's a consulting company or even a production company of sorts, or should I just stick to doing my postgrad and become a full-time researcher? What's out there for me?
I have a very good answer to that one.
Okay.
And I would say that there's actually lots of opportunities for entrepreneurs in this space.
Okay, please listen. Take out your pens, your pencils, your phones. Listen.
Yes.
Let's go.
I'm going to look at the camera and I'm going to answer this one as well.
Speak to them.
So we know that hydrogen, as I said earlier on, hydrogen is the new in thing, and everybody wants to get into hydrogen. But if you look at the technology for green hydrogen at this stage, you're looking at electrolyzers and fuel cells, which have platinum group metals that need to be used. So very expensive technology.
Yes.
Now, going back to the entrepreneurial question. So we do know that South Africa is pushing a lot towards the biogas space, right? Trying to use biogas as a clean energy source and everything like that. So that's one space where entrepreneurs can get in, right?
Yes.
You can make decentralized anaerobic digesters so that you can actually, contribute to the energy space.
Yes.
But that's not where it ends.
Oh, okay. Let me calm myself down. There's more.
Yes. Because now if you take that space and you said, but excuse me, we do know that hydrogen is going to come. And we do know that there's vehicles that are going to be using hydrogen itself as well. So now if you've got the biogas, you can separate to multiple processes to separate and get out the biomethane.
Yes.
We do know that there's already cars that can run on biomethane. So again, there's another tick. And that's just one process that you've just added to this. So either just on the generation of biogas, that's the one opportunity, or you do a whole bunch of cleaning, one process, you get to the biomethane, there's your second opportunity.
Okay.
Or you crack the biomethane, like I said, then into hydrogen. There's your third opportunity. And like I said, we know that there's going to be a large demand of hydrogen coming. What quality of hydrogen is still debatable, but most of the cars are going to need quite high qualities of hydrogen. So you might need to add a few extra things. But the point being is that from the biogas space, biogas 1, biomethane 2, hydrogen 3, solid carbons 4, that's what I say. There's lots of space for entrepreneurs to get involved in either of those ones.
I like this. I mean, just thinking about the organic fraction that we find in our urban areas, if we had more, I suppose, decentralized biogas systems, that's some really good, we called it material input.
Yep.
And you can follow through with these. Yeah, there's a whole value chain of opportunities that's created. Question is, do I need to purchase really expensive technologies, or are there some locally manufactured technologies that I can explore?
I'm going to just ask the question back for clarification. Are we speaking necessarily on the biogas space, or are we speaking about the whole value chain that I was just...
The whole value chain.
Okay. So on the biogas space, no, you don't need to buy very expensive things. I don't want to sound like the cowboy and said there's lots of YouTube videos on how you can make biogas digesters at home.
Okay.
But yes, I suppose if you want to buy,
Yeah.
you can buy really cheap small scale anaerobic digesters as well.
Mm.
If you do, then try to go towards the hydrogen space on the other side.
Yes.
Then technology becomes more expensive, only because your processes becomes more complex as you go down the route. So an upgrading step, you can quite easily do that as well with a few tricks here and there.
Yes.
But then once you get to the hydrogen space, then you start knowing that you need to operate at 700 degrees Celsius. And now that's not a normal oven.
Yeah.
How do you get heat for a 700 degrees Celsius process? These are those type of reactor configurations that one would have to look at as well. So again, depending on how far you go, there's a bit more investment that's needed. But also know that by the time you get to the hydrogen phase, if you want to sell hydrogen as a product, it's also a more expensive product. So you're investing a lot upfront, but you can also ask a lot more for your product at the end.
I'm with you.
I just need to add one thing to this as well, because we're speaking about biogas and decentralized energy applications. I'm of the view that if you need energy and you want to use biogas as energy, that's the route to go. In terms of if you've got biogas and you need electricity or energy, then just burn the biogas. If you see another opportunity for that, and I'm going with in the future where South Africa has plans to have hydrogen vehicles on the road, somebody's going to need hydrogen for the hydrogen car, wherever it's going to be. Yeah. Then you can go into that route, but just know that that's going to take a lot longer than your energy requirement. We know where South Africa sits with energy crises at this stage.
Ish.
And yeah, unfortunately, biogas is a bridge for answering those questions.
Yeah.
Not going all the way to hydrogen. The hydrogen thing would be for, like I said, different applications, not an energy application. Yeah.
Okay. Again, with my entrepreneurial hat, I set up a biogas system, and I do have plans to explore, the hydrogen linkage. Do I need to have a minimum tonnage per day or a certain AD size that can allow me to explore hydrogen while servicing my energy needs?
Yeah. I don't want to sound like I'm self-advertising over here. We actually did some calculations, techno-economic calculations, in terms of scales. If you've got large-scale anaerobic digesters, and I'm speaking about greenfields, building from scratch.
Yes.
We know how expensive anaerobic digesters, like I said, at scale are. Then your hydrogen at the end actually is on par with the price of green hydrogen. Then economies of scale doesn't come into effect anymore. However, if you are investing, or say, if you already have anaerobic digesters that are not being used or utilized or anything to that effect, there is a number, and I can't remember what exactly the number was, where you can see that at this scale, then hydrogen actually becomes competitive with the grey hydrogen prices. So what we're currently producing, but that is only where your anaerobic digester cost has already been taken out of the equation, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you like you said, if you think of small scale digesters, unless if you have a local use for the hydrogen,
Yes.
I don't think you would ever be able to sell it competitively.
Yes.
Unfortunately, yeah.
Okay, it brings us now to a very interesting perspective, because entrepreneurship is also about access to markets. Because you can create product X, but the market tells you not today, or your passion is not what resonates with the demand out there. Now, what type of market opportunities are out there? There could be those that speak, let's say, to your SASO related activities, but can we also find them in day-to-day communities? Can I use them some sort of hydrogen in my backyard, aside from the vehicle, carbon, cakes? I'm really just poking here.
No, I think you asked a very, very good question. I think in our own group, we have that question that gets asked at us is that if you're going to make a product, what is the market? Where is it going? And like you said, coming from an entrepreneurial point of view, is an entrepreneur would ask the same question: is that yes, I can do this, but do I have a market to sell it?
Yeah.
And I'm going back to my earlier comment as well, is that if you're looking at very small scale biogas, decentralized energy applications or decentralized anaerobic digesters, use that for energy applications.
Yes.
Use that for energy around if it's home or community or whatever size you're looking at.
Yes.
Use that for energy applications. Do not go into the hydrogen space.
Okay.
The amount of hydrogen that you would require does, however, require large investment costs. So if you want to make hydrogen at home, you can, but you're not going to use it for. You'll only use it for, I don't know, making balloons for that matter.
That's a business opportunity right there. Hydrogen inflated balloons for parties.
Instead of helium. Yeah, just don't have a flame very close to them.
Never mind, scratch that part. Whoops. Okay, because there will be a birthday candle to blow out, and it might just be a bang.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. Now, have you ever considered being an entrepreneur within this space? Honest answer.
I was just about that. I always clarify a certain question. Do you want the honest answer?
Yes, the honest answer, because this is what will also provide nuggets for our viewers to really introspect, because it's not something you just wake up and do. So when you hear from other people's honest answers, introspection takes place.
Okay, so my honest answer, and I've said this to, I'm going to say, multiple people who've asked me similar type of questions. I've always seen myself as an engineer.
Yes.
And when I say that, I mean as in, give me something, I'll figure out the process, and I'll give you a product at the end. I've never seen myself at the other end where, the business guy, the entrepreneur, where it's just, I think my interest has never been in the business side of things.
You don't want to eat noodles. That's the truth. You don't want to eat noodles and dry bread, figuring out when the next salary is coming in.
Maybe that also.
I'm teasing.
But no. So in a similar trend and a joke as well, is that I actually love 2-minute noodles.
Oh,
so it's not,
okay.
So that's not a deterrent. So that's not a deterrent. But no, like I said, my interest has just never been in business space.
Yes.
I can analyze the markets because that's what our group is also doing quite a bit. But business-wise, I don't see myself as a businessman. So to answer your question honestly, I see opportunities, and I'll give other people, the chance to explore those opportunities, but I've just never seen myself being the business guy to drive those.
I absolutely respect your answer because it speaks to self-awareness. You know that this is where your talents lie, and these are the talents that can catalyze opportunities for others. So that is really commendable, because at times you'll find someone wakes up and says, hey, I'm going to start this thing, but why are you starting it? Do you know if it actually tickles your fancy or if you actually see something wonderful come out of it? And having these honest responses, again, it's part of just ensuring that we make conscious and realistic choices, because it's a calling to be on that side, eh?
I was just about to say, I think everybody needs to have that introspection and understand, is this something I want to do? Is this something that I'm just doing for the sake of, I'm going to put it even bluntly, for the sake of just having a salary? Even if it's, even if it's your own company or entrepreneurial in investment. But you need to understand is this something that you're going to see yourself doing long term, because business, and maybe that's the thing.
Mm.
Business is not just about I sold a product over here. There's lots of things related to business and client support and after sales support and on all of those type of things. And that's why I'm saying I see myself rather on the process side, and I'll give you a product, and I'll leave the business for somebody else.
Got you. Got you. And as we are winding down to our conversation, are you inspired to do something differently, even in your own home or within your immediate environment? If so, what are some of those low-hanging fruits?
So, and I'm going to go back to my cowboy YouTube video stills. I've already actually thought of, is it possible for me to put up a small scale anaerobic digester at home? And the reason I say that is that we have lots of garden refuse. The glass clippings. We've got trees at the back growing, so there's lots of leaves and stuff. Um, I've considered that.
Yes.
At some stage. The only problem with that is that like I said early on, I have a current 3-year-old toddler who wants to do everything that daddy's doing at this stage. And if daddy's gonna tinker with biogas, I'm just afraid that she might just get injured. So it's on hold only because of the safety aspects with the little one at this stage. But it's a thought that has crossed my mind many times. We've got, like I said, we've got biomass, if I can call it that, at home, which we can use to run one of our ovens or stoves. We've got that capability. I just haven't gotten around to doing it yet.
I like that you keep referring to your daughter, because when the time is right, that's going to be skills development right there and then. And she would be part of the decision makers who become intentional tomorrow. Say, right, justice for biogas. Like, where's this coming from? We started at home. My dad showed me. I was 5, yada, yada. So that's where the inspiration would come from.
I just have to say, though, unfortunately, at this stage, she's swinging between an engineer and a medical doctor because mom is medical doctor.
Okay.
So I'll have to win that fight for her to fight for biogas, as you've just said.
Well, on the bright side, I can invite her when she's at least 5 or 6 to come on the green couch, and we'll see if we can convince her.
Okay.
Yes.
That sounds like a good idea.
Make a plan. Because it's certainly something I'd like to do. Just have younger people on the couch as well and just pick their minds around these sustainability concepts, where their interest is. Because you find when kids are doing some recycling what at school and they come home to you, they're the ones who are policing you. Mommy, no. Daddy, no. They're the ones who are saying, but teacher says we must separate, or teacher says we must. So in the near future, just get her ready to also come to the green couch.
That's actually true, because she has a friend who's part of an external club. I forgot the name of what they're called, but they do recycling activities. They quite recently, I think my wife told me that they were doing a composting, so earthworms, and then composting that, and then obviously using that in a garden to grow vegetables or whatever it is that they were growing. But it's there, like you said, at a young age, and at schools they're teaching them about recycling and reusing and all of those things.
Yes.
And like you said, maybe at some stage you get younger people instead of me that way and stuff like that, to come and speak to you about, where the new generation is thinking, where the old generation has left us.
Well, it's still important to have you so that we can appreciate the current and then see where those future gaps and opportunities lie. All right. And as parting points to literally anyone and everyone who's listening, whether they've got an engineering or non-engineering background, what would your call to action be for them to do things differently?
It would sound hypocritical for me to say, start at home.
Oh, really? You don't say.
We're getting sarcastic.
Hey, it's good to throw in a bit of vibes in the conversation.
No, but in all honesty, I think we all need to start at home. When I say at home, I mean as in that introspective
Yeah.
understanding. Sit at home, and you're thinking, I've just had a really good braai vleis and meat over here, and there's still food left. And what's going to happen? I'm going to throw it in the bin. But if you throw that into a composter, if you throw that into a anaerobic digester, if you've got that at home, there's extra value that can come from that.
Yes.
And I think, like I said, it's hypocritical from me because we've already said that I don't do it at home. But I think that's where it needs to start. You can't advocate outside and say, you need to do this, and then you go home and you do something completely different.
Yeah.
And yes, we know you can fight for policy and you can fight for regulations and you can fight all on those fronts. But I think if it doesn't start at home, and like you said, even if I don't do it, but if I teach my little kid to start doing it, the next batch that comes in will have a better thinking and better, grasp of how to handle the waste as well.
Yeah.
So that's my parting shot. I think it sounds, like I said, one, hypocritical, and it sounds very cliche in itself as well. But I think we all just need to sit down, think of where is my waste going? And then there's such a lot of waste that we generate. But where is it going? What can I do with it differently that can benefit myself, that can benefit the community? And then just take it from there.
Yeah. Look, on the bright side, the important thing is we are having these conversations, and that's why the Green Couch is here. So we might not be getting it right 100%, but we are talking about it. And the more we'll talk about it, the more we'll repeat it. It would hopefully become part of our daily activities.
Yeah.
So my parting point to you is, let's keep the conversations going with every person we come across and just let them see the opportunities that waste in its entirety has to offer. So whether you're looking at it from a hydrogen perspective, that value chain of hydrogen, what byproducts can be made, or you're looking at it from a organic waste perspective, the compost that you've touched on, the biogas that he's touched on, even briquettes, biochar as well. That's a whole beautiful process, because that biochar is a alternative to the charcoal for braai weekends and rugby matches. So it's a whole circular system along those lines. Yeah, and I suppose this is the main takeaway from this particular episode. So whether you are in a tertiary institution or you're still trying to figure out what's next for you, this has kind of paved the picture, showing you what is tangible in the immediate environment. And of course, as you start to explore more fascinating and interesting technologies, particularly in spaces like hydrogen, the opportunities are still there. It's then a matter of identifying the funders that can walk that journey with you. And I like to believe that South Africa, as well as other parts of the continent, are relatively well, I suppose, positioned to identify those prospective funders that one can always explore such opportunities. Yeah. Any last epiphanies?
No, you actually touched a very good point in terms of the continent. So Africa as a whole, still highly, I want to say, biomass focused. So whereas I want to say the more developed countries have looked towards a lot more of the renewable spaces, like I said, your solars and winds and stuff like that. But Africa as a whole has a large biomass focus. And when I say that, I'm then going towards your anaerobic digesters, your biochar that you mentioned as well. So there's lots of opportunities, not just locally, but we should actually, when I say look north to our neighbors on the continent as well. Yeah.
Okay. When we start exploring the virtual podcast, we'll certainly touch base so that we can go north and ensure that these colleagues are also part of the conversation and the mindset shifting. Thank you so much. It really was a pleasure having you on couch. And let's trust that our conversation will see many more households and even people in their respective organizations actually throwing plastic inside the right bin. Yeah, it was such a treat to have you. And until next time. In fact, we said next time we'll be asking if you've started your separation at source.
Yes.
Yeah, so at the end of this season, we'll follow up and see if that is happening. All right. Thank you too at home, in your cars, as well as various workplaces for being intentional to not waste a single story. Until next time, goodbye and separate at source. Cheers.